call the October 14th, 2024 meeting of the Leitchfield Planning Commission to order. I will call the roll. Chairman Mark Buckles is here. Commissioner Wes Whitmore. Commissioner Melissa Mudd.
Here.
Commissioner April Bowman. Commissioner Kendall Clemens.
Kendall told me to tell you he's on vacation. That's the reason he won't be here tonight.
Okay. I didn't realize that was an option.
I didn't either.
Commissioner Tim Bocock.
Here.
Commissioner George Hack.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum, so we can hold our meeting. You should have the minutes of the September 9 meeting in front of you. You may have had a chance to glance at those this afternoon as they were delivered to you, but after you have reviewed those and you are satisfied with them, I will accept a motion to amend or accept the meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the minutes as read.
George with the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Missy with the second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, there are the minutes. Let's see, Councilwoman Haycraft is here as a visitor. Good to see you. Thank you for attending. We will move on to, did you have anything for us specifically, Terry? Okay, very good. We will move to old and unfinished business, and first up is the medical cannabis ordinance. I think we did most of the heavy lifting on that, but where are we at, gentlemen?
Okay, we need just a few things that we need to clarify, and
Okay.
then we're ready to advertise it. And if you can bear with me a few minutes here, we'll go over that. The way we determined and what we determined last time, the cannabis cultivator will be the store. It basically is what it amounts to, or that the dispensary, the processor, and the producer. And the cultivator, we determined it was going to be in the would be in the light industrial and the agricultural zone, I believe. If I want to make sure we're correct on that. The dispensary would be in the high commercial, the highway commercial zone, the CI zone. The cannabis processor would be in the light industrial and the agricultural, the way I put it together. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the cannabis producer would be the light industrial and the agricultural. Now, I don't think we really talked too much about that, but Tyler and I spoke together and we thought we could put it in either one of those. And if that suits you all, and it looks like it would.
Was it the processor?
It's a producer.
Okay, but which one of them we discussed would be more nondescript, that was not?
That is the safety and compliance facility.
Okay.
We haven't got to that one yet. We haven't talked about that very much.
Okay.
Now, the safety and compliance facility, what we thought of, that's one we kind of left up in the air. If that's what you're talking about, Mark. And after we talked about it, we thought it would go in any of those zones, except the actual state definition for that states that they also can use it for anything that to sell. Now let me get that exact wording because I don't want to mess it up. Bear with me a minute here. Engage in any non-cannabis related business activities that are not otherwise prohibited or restricted by state law. And I think we need to add to that, or in violation of the zoning ordinance, because you'll have some things that they would be able to do that would not fit within that particular zone. And so when we looked at that, it wouldn't do what we thought we would do until we read that definition that the state had put out. So we need, I think, to add that wording if it's all right with you.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It just makes sense that that's what we would do. Okay, that sounds good. And we've got, and now the other thing we need to talk about is the sign. And that's something that we did talk about briefly, and Tyler and I got a little confused on that. He had one thought and I had another. So I was thinking that that the sign had to be attached to the building. Tyler thought that it could also be on a pole out front there. And so you all make up your mind what you'd like to do. I personally think it, you know, my feeling was it should be attached to the building, but, you know, you may want, you know, the sign's not gonna be able to have the logo on it and things of this nature, but what do you want to do on that? So I can make sure I can clarify that.
Well, I think there's you know, I've been at the sign game for a long time, involved in some of the writing of the initial proposal, even back in the late 90s, that was more restrictive than what we ended up with. It was modeled after Bardstown. And I think you'll oftentimes find people who think that signs are an advertising expedition. And while they do have that value, signs at their very nature are for wayfinding, for people to find the way where they need to go, and as it relates to traffic. That's really the prism that you have to look at the signage from, is from a safety standpoint, from a traffic standpoint, from a routing standpoint. How do I get to my destination and location if I don't automatically know where I'm going? Now, this particular instance is going to be rare, if at all available, and so I think there will be very little doubt on the actual location. But I think it's important that we look at it from the value of providing information to a motorist or a pedestrian, more so than what does it look like from an advertising standpoint. So I'll give you, you can mull that over momentarily. Tyler, was there a particular reason was there virtue on why you thought that it should be detached?
I just thought we were going to go ahead and do what the city of Henderson had in their sign ordinance.
Treat it like
As it-
everything else?
As it was, and that's, you know, they allow it. So, but, I mean,
I guess
I'm neutral, so.
I would remind us too, I think we found out there were some obvious things there were some concerning things that could go on signs that had been addressed. So it didn't feel like we were going to be overly exposed. There were already some limitations on the actual content of the signs. So I think we maybe don't have to worry as much about the placement. Dave, did you have strong feelings on why you thought it should be
My feelings are that we just didn't want to see a cannabis sign sitting out in the street, by the street. And that was my feeling, and that's the reason you can do that, but, you know, the sign post and have the sign, but I think you ought to attach it to the building, and that's the way you know, you can put it on the building, people can see it, and they're gonna find it. But that's just my feelings.
Sure. Yeah, Tim?
Just out of curiosity, can we treat one business type different than another?
You certainly can in this
Okay.
instance.
Then
That's
that
a
would
good point.
be my answer.
We've got the law allows us to do that in this instance, so
Yes, sir.
that's the reason these are some things we need to clear up. We didn't talk about.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the city council, I don't know how I tried to talk to some of them, but they may have a different idea about it. So we're gonna advertise it and then we'll send it on to them, and of course they can change it as they desire, if they like it.
Yeah, I mean, it could definitely get handed back if there's a problem. I guess I would remind us back, if we go back 60 days when we're having these conversations, I think I certainly was taking an extremely conservative approach to it and thinking that it needed protections from varying uses, that we wanted to be sensitive to those types of things. And the information we got back was no reason to bother. And so, I mean, I personally would kind of be with Dave, but I think the consensus of what we heard from the people is treat it like you're treating everything else, which is surprising to me, but.
What do you think the city council would like? I mean, we kind of addressed it, we kind of threw it off to you to see what you all would like. Do you think that they would feel better if it was attached to the building?
I think that it is extremely important for you all to keep in mind that this is strictly for medicinal purposes. That is all it's about. Whenever it comes to the point of a recreational recreational has ever passed in the state of Kentucky, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But right now, this is strictly for medicinal purposes with very strict guidelines. With,
Okay.
I think there's like six different cases where someone may be prescribed a card. As far as signage goes, I'm like Tyler, where we thought it was, that you all were gonna go along with
Henderson,
city, county,
City of Henderson.
yeah, the city of Henderson. I don't think that it needs to be to the point of, if these people need the medication, I don't want them to feel shamed into going and getting what is being prescribed compared to harder, more addictive painkillers that, or if that's what they're even called. This is a milder form of treatment for these patients. And I mean, as I've stated before, our legislators have already made the decision for us. This is going to be legal in the state of Kentucky.
Right.
Our challenge now is how difficult are we going to make it for these people to have access to it?
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, I think it's very helpful information. I think it's important guidance. I think we know that you're one of 6, but I think it's very important information for us to consider and knowing kind of which way that the winds are blowing. The hardest, I think, one of the challenging things about this is that, you know, the deliberation was we were looking at it through the fear of recreation. And we were getting hung up on that. If it's treated like medicine, it should be treated like medicine. Where it's different is that to this point, the medicine comes from the pharmacy. You know, or over the counter from a drugstore that has a pharmacy attached. And now you have a dedicated location to this particular medicine that's being prescribed to people. If it had just gone through pharmacies, we would not be having this discussion. But again, because of our history with this particular product, with THC, we have this ideology in our mind that it is one thing when, as Terry mentions, the state of Kentucky has already done the heavy lifting on this. As I said earlier, I would have been like Dave, well, keep it in its place, you know, don't make a big deal about it, it's there, et cetera. But that's not what I've heard from the public or even from the council, that we need to worry about it. So
I think I'm kind of skewed like you are, Mark. It's a situation where I've through the years, you know, I've been bombarded with the dangers of marijuana. I guess that's what goes through my mind all the time.
yeah, well,
That's not right.
yeah, we're going to find out. You know, there are things we don't know that we're going to find out in the next decade as we cross this bridge, as the Commonwealth crosses this bridge. But I hope that it's been good information that you've had. So I guess we just kind of need to give them some direction on where to go, whether we're staying with more of the path of the city of Henderson, which we've kind of modeled from a signage standpoint, or whether we're going the more discreet route.
Well, and to reiterate her point, I look at it as it's a medical clinic. So it is something that's clinical and just like an outpatient facility that we're accustomed to now. So I would look at it kind of like yourself, that we keep it very muted and follow the direction of any medical facility that we currently have zoning in place for.
I think most any pharmacy in the community has a sign that's detached from their building.
They do.
I would like for the signs to say, you know, medical cannabis, if that's possible, and still the marijuana itself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a good point.
And I wouldn't have no trouble with putting it on the building and a little sign, if we could use the cannabis word,
Right.
you know, versus the marijuana. Yeah, I don't know, Dave, could we do that in the language?
Well, that's not in the ordinance itself, it's not the way I drafted it. That was
We
on the
covered the
question.
contents last month about what the
I don't
contents
wanna
of the
mislead
sign
anybody on the
could
medical,
not or had to
Yeah.
Terry
say.
said.
I've got it right here.
Well, yeah, I was getting ready to read it.
It says exterior signage may only at most include text that is the licensee's business or trade name, excuse me, location and contact information, business type. Exterior signage cannot include a licensee's logo, symbol, branded colors, or any images, including but not limited to depicting cannabis, cannabis products, or the imagery or action of smoking or vaping. Exterior signs also cannot include mottos, selling messages, or any other non-essential text. Exterior signs must be on the same parcel as the store and affixed to a building or permanent structure, example, signpost. Exterior signage cannot be larger than necessary to reasonably display the information on the sign to individuals within or near the licensed premises and cannot be illuminated by neon lights.
Why don't we add to that, that the sign should only contain the words medical cannabis? That would make me feel better, I don't know, that's just
I like that.
my feeling.
Yeah,
I think that's just me, as I said.
right.
I have no vote or anything else, so.
What do you think, Terry?
The law from the state of Kentucky does not use the word marijuana.
No, they use medical cannabis.
So I guess I'm surprised that that word might even be allowed. Like, I would have figured, as we've relied upon the state to do a lot of the heavy lifting, I guess I would be surprised that it would be allowed. But
See, I don't know what their license is gonna say. I mean, I don't have a clue, Mark, and you don't
Right.
either. We don't know
No.
what the state license is gonna say.
But it sounds like they've got it nailed down, pretty tight. The other thing I guess these patients that are prescribed this medical cannabis product, I think they're going to consider themselves fortunate if they have the opportunity to buy it in Leitchfield. We're looking at it from well, what if there are 6 of these in our community? At most, there will be one. And likely, there's not even one.
Right.
So we're having to prepare for the eventuality that it might happen, but there's no certainty that it's going to happen. So we may be getting bogged down in the weeds on what word it can use and what word it might not be able to use. So
Is the KRS very nonspecific here, and that's why we need to be much more specific?
I'm surprised they're not as specific on this. If they're not as specific on this, I'm surprised that
Yeah.
they're not. Because it was not sold as legislation called medical marijuana, it was medical cannabis legislation.
I'd like to know what the KRS is, just,
Well, hold on a minute. Check. Medical cannabis is marijuana as defined in KRS 218.010. And thought I had it. As Mark said, the state did do a lot of, this is a pretty in-depth statute, so you have to bear with me a second. They refer to it as a medical cannabis is what they refer to it.
yes, sir. Do they spell out any specifics for signage?
No,
Okay, so,
no, they don't.
so that's what we need to address.
No.
Okay, that makes
they didn't-
sense.
They didn't do that at all.
Okay.
I guess that didn't come up, never thought about that probably.
Then in that case, then I agree with Dave that it should bear the medical cannabis. And I think the sign on the building is fine. If, much like the pharmacies, if they want a sign outside, I think that'd be fine too. Just one of several opinions here. That's,
George, I think you already expressed your opinion on it. Didn't, Missy, do you have thoughts?
I'm the same way. I agree that it needs to be treated like a medical facility with the enumeration of medical cannabis on the sign, just to alliterate the purpose of the facility, so.
That's my opinion too. Or will the city
So,
council agree?
whatever the best way for that language is. Again, I don't think it's a,
I'll do it that way.
Okay.
The
Put
public
that-
hearing will be next meeting, so we'll have it all, yeah, you know what it's gonna be, it's gonna be put together. It's
yeah,
gonna be-
well, we'll,
Sir.
and I don't think we need a motion on that because we're going to get language from Dave that has the actual
Right.
text language that then we will approve and recommend to the council. And so we haven't even seen a draft of it yet. But once we do, it'll be in there like that.
I do have one other thing to bring up. Give me just 1 second, though. I'm trying to catch up here.
Yeah.
While he's doing that, if you wanna, do you wanna move to condominium? I've got it put together, but I
Well-
did change the definition of multifamily because it doesn't really work with, it doesn't work with the new definition set forth by the legislature in the new act. So I've got a new condominium section that goes under which will go under the.
You have that ready for us to review?
No, I don't have it tonight, but Tyler's been gone, I'm gonna blame him, because I haven't been able to go over with him, so. And then he's going again next week.
Yeah.
So
good for you, Tyler.
we had discussed in previous meetings about the buffer zones and how we wanted to do that. And we talked with, or I had went and talked with the council members at one of the workshop meetings. And then the last meeting, we didn't discuss any extra buffer zones. And then it was brought up to me by one of the council members that we had discussed doing a buffer zone for churches. And I went back and looked at my notes, and we did. They had requested for me to check into a 200-foot buffer zone from churches. I did some research on that today, and I looked, and the bulk of our commercialized zones, the churches in those areas are already inside of the buffer zone for the schools and daycares, which theirs is 1,000 feet. There's only 5 churches that are not inside of that buffer zone already, and 3 of those are on Highway 62, and then the other 2 are right down here by Southgate Mall. They're pretty much side by side. So those would really be the only ones that would affect any commercialized area. All the other churches are in surrounding by residential areas. So I didn't know if y'all wanted to put that in there and present it that way, or just leave it.
I want to make sure I heard you correctly. You heard from one council member?
One council member brought it to my attention that I didn't bring it up at the last meeting.
Okay. But we discussed it at length last meeting about whether we were going to give any additional protections beyond those that were afforded by the state of Kentucky, and we declined to do so, as I recall us voting. Is that right?
That's what I recall, Mark.
Okay.
So while you might not have brought it up specifically, I think it was talked about at length.
We were gonna let the KRS stand
That's the way I drafted it.
As is, okay.
as is.
Okay.
I think
So
Kel made the motion to do.
Tyler, thanks for bringing that to our attention, but I think you were, I think the people were heard on that, so. Anything else?
I don't have anything.
All right. Is there any new business? Do I have a motion that we adjourn?